everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into what might be the most challenging and most transformative phase of the Recalibrate coaching methodology, the disconnect phase. If you've been following along with our series, you know we've been working through a systematic approach to identify and address the limiting beliefs, conditioning, biases, and assumptions that have been unconsciously guiding your life. Today, we're focusing on that critical moment where awareness meets action, where we decide if we're truly ready to let go of the old to make space for the new. Before we dive into the disconnect phase, let's quickly recap where we've been in the recalibrate journey so far. In the discover phase, we identified the limiting beliefs and the conditioning patterns that have been operating beneath the surface of your consciousness. These are those persistent thoughts like, I'm not enough, or I don't deserve success, that you've accepted as truth about yourself and how the world works. Then in the define cost phase, we honestly assessed the impact of these beliefs and the cost that they've had on your life, physically, emotionally, psychologically, and even financially. We acknowledged the price you've been paying for holding on to these beliefs. And most recently, in the deconstruct phase, we methodically took apart these beliefs, examining their origin and authority. We looked at who originally wrote these scripts you've been following and questioned whether they're actually valid or true. We brought these unconscious patterns into the light of awareness. Each of these phases builds on the previous one, creating a foundation of awareness and understanding. But awareness alone doesn't create change. That's where the disconnect phase comes in. So what does disconnect even mean? The disconnect phase is exactly what it sounds like. It's where we begin to separate ourselves from those limiting beliefs, assumptions, and conditioning patterns we've identified, deconstructed, and assessed. It's where we actively loosen the grip these beliefs have had on our identity and our choices. But here's what makes this phase so challenging. These beliefs and conditioning, no matter how limiting they've been, have served a purpose. They've been protection mechanisms. They've helped you make sense of difficult experiences. They've given you a framework for navigating the world, even if that framework has ultimately limited you. Disconnecting from these beliefs can feel like letting go of a piece of yourself. It can trigger things like resistance, uncertainty, and even grief. All of these are completely normal. What I've found in my work is that people often struggle most with this phase because of something unexpected, which is the guilt. There can be guilt about abandoning beliefs that were passed down through family. Guilt about admitting you've been living according to someone else's script. Or guilt about the time you've spent operating under these limitations. But it's important to remember, disconnecting from these beliefs doesn't mean rejecting your past or the people who influenced you. It means making a conscious choice about what will guide your future. The psychological landscape of disconnection is complex and honestly deeply personal. When we truly begin to disconnect from our limiting beliefs and conditioning, we're not just changing our thoughts, we're actually shifting our entire identity structure. These beliefs haven't just been ideas floating in your mind. They've been the architecture of how you understand yourself and your place in the world. They've informed your decisions, your relationships, your sense of possibility, and probably even your boundaries. They've been woven into the fabric of who you think you are and how you operate in this world. This is why disconnection can trigger what feels like an identity crisis. When you start to let go of the belief that I must take care of everyone else before myself, you might wonder, who am I if not the caretaker? What is my value if not in sacrifice? These are profound existential questions that naturally arise. I know this is exactly how I felt when I realized I didn't want to have children. If I won't be a mother, then who will I be? And I had the added difficulty of having my beliefs so tied to societal beliefs about womanhood and motherhood that it felt like I was spiraling. Many people experience what I call belief vertigo during this phase, a disorienting sensation of not knowing what's true anymore. The ground beneath you feels shaky because you're questioning the very foundations you've built your entire life upon. Again, this belief vertigo is exactly what I experienced when I stripped off all conditioning, beliefs, and biases and unbecame everything I was ever told and taught to be. There's also what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable tension that arises when you're holding two conflicting ideas simultaneously. Part of you recognizes that the limiting belief isn't serving you, while another part clings to it because it's so familiar. This internal conflict is not just intellectual, it's visceral. You might feel it as anxiety, restlessness, or even physical discomfort. And then there's the grief again. Even when you're letting go of something that has hurt you, there can be a genuine sense of loss. You're saying goodbye to a perspective that, however limiting, has been a companion for perhaps your entire life. Acknowledging this grief rather than bypassing it is such an essential part of healthy disconnection. Let me be completely honest with you. This phase can be really difficult. I've worked with clients who breeze through the awareness phases, but hit a wall when it actually comes to letting go. I had one client who clearly saw how her belief that conflict is dangerous was limiting her career and relationships. She could trace it back to her childhood in a very volatile home. She understood its impact, but when it came time to disconnect, she froze. The belief had been protecting her for so long that letting go felt like removing a safety net. What was happening psychologically for her? Her nervous system was essentially saying, "This belief has kept me safe. Letting it go feels dangerous." Our bodies and minds are wired for survival, not necessarily for growth and fulfillment. The disconnect phase often triggers our most primal safety mechanisms. Another client described the disconnect process as feeling like learning to breathe underwater. Everything in her resisted initially. Her limiting belief that I must achieve to be worthy had driven her to success in many areas of her life. But the prospect of letting it go triggered fear of becoming passive or losing her edge. What she eventually realized is actually what many of us need to realize, is that disconnecting from a limiting belief doesn't mean losing the positive intentions behind it. You can maintain your drive for excellence without tying it to your sense of worthiness. You can value safety without believing all conflict is dangerous. This is the subtle psychological work of disconnection, separating the functional from the dysfunctional aspects of our belief systems. It's not about tearing everything down. It's about carefully removing the constraints while preserving the wisdom and knowledge. As we explore the psychological complexity of the disconnect phase, I want to acknowledge that this isn't something that happens overnight. It's a gradual process of loosening the grip these beliefs and conditioning patterns have on your identity and on your choices. You might find yourself in what I call the dance of disconnect, taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back as you navigate this new territory. Some days you'll feel the freedom of letting go and you'll see that life on the other side. And other days, the old belief will assert itself with surprising strength. This isn't failure. It's part of the process. Let it happen and be kind to yourself if and when it does. What matters is developing the awareness to recognize when you're operating from these limiting beliefs and conditioning patterns, and remembering that you have a choice. Even if you're not ready to fully disconnect, that recognition alone creates a small space between you and the belief. And that space is where your freedom begins. The disconnect phase is the final step before we reach the change point or choice point in the Recalibrate methodology. It's where the work of the previous phases, discover, define cost, and deconstruct, culminates in the possibility of true transformation. Without this psychological letting go, any attempts to build new beliefs will be built on shaky foundations. Next week, we'll talk more about the guilt, anger, and even shame that the disconnect step can bring up. All of these emotions are a natural part of the process and crucial to actually moving forward and creating the life that you want. In the comments below, I'd love to hear what emotions or resistance you are experiencing as you consider disconnecting from your limiting belief or conditioning patterns. Your vulnerability might help someone else feel less alone in their own process and journey. Don't forget to join our community of conscious, authentic changemakers. Until next week, remember, disconnection isn't just about letting go of old beliefs. It's about reclaiming your authorship of your own story. See you soon, and thank you so much for watching.